Good evening and welcome to the Fact Check This podcast, a very special Sunday evening live stream. Today I am joined by good friends and guests of the show, Trey Daniel and Mark Metz. And this is the first time that Trey and Mark have been on the show together. So I am outnumbered by gingers tonight, which is interesting, a new phenomenon for me. But we are going to, speaking of gingers, we are going to be talking about villains.
There we go. Nice.
You can't talk about villains without mentioning gingers. I mean, obviously.
We are soulless creatures.
Should we talk about some of the literary and movie and comic book villains who have been gingers, or should we do more of the let's do some introductions first, since the two of you haven't
been. Talking Anne of Green Gables right now?
Of course you bring it back around to that. Let's do some introductions first, since the two of you haven't been on the show together before. That way you get to know who each other are. So introduce yourselves, and then we'll kind of take it from there.
Yeah, I'm Trey 50 Daniel, frequent tweeter, Twitch streamer, occasional YouTube video uploader if I ever get around to doing that. I usually stream on Twitch and just talk about stuff and play video games. So
nice. Mark Metz. I run the Emergent at Substack. markmetz.substack.com. I'm a writer there, and I also do a morning show with that loser Justin every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, called The Morning After. It is at 8:30 a.m. Eastern, and we won't even talk about the other time zones.
If you want to catch Mark on the show, you should tune in Monday and Friday. He tends to bail
Wednesdays.
out on us. He tends to duck out on us on Wednesdays for some reason.
Also, if you want to see just me on the show, maybe 8:35, 8:40, somewhere around there.
Yeah, don't show up at 8:30. He will not be on time.
You didn't tell me this was live.
Well, I hadn't really considered it initially, and then as I was thinking about it, especially with the topic, it's it feels like something that I would like to get feedback from, anybody that might want to tune in and kind of listen to us talk about this topic. It would be something to get feedback, because everybody has differing opinions on villains. So I'm going to share the tweet that kind of kicked this off. While we're at it, Trey can answer some questions.
I usually stream me playing shooter games, so Call of Duty, stuff like that. That's primarily what I stream. But I play a variety of games. I play a lot of different games. I've been playing stuff like Ark Survival Evolved and just a plethora of games lately. So,
all right. So this is the tweet that kind of kicked this whole thing off. Average downer ending fan. Oh my science! Everyone dies and the villain wins. And then average happy ending enjoyer. The main character saves the world and gets the girl. Splendid. And Trey's comment on this was, he didn't understand why people. What was it? I never understood the reasoning why people enjoy watching the villains win. And then you also made some clarification on that, which I'll let you. You can go into your clarification as well, because you said you did kind of understand it, and it's the nihilism thing. Where I personally, and Dag and I actually had this conversation on Wednesday, very, very, very briefly on the morning show, but we talked about it a little bit. I actually tend to side with the villains for varying different reasons. And
what does that mean, you side with them?
He's a fan of the villains.
You said that. You told me this in a text, and I was going to press the issue there, but I was like, well, if I'm going to be on the show, I'll ask him then.
All right, so if you look at Thanos,
he has a Joker poster in his background.
Yeah.
That's what he's telling you.
And I might end up agreeing with him. I just want to hear what he has to say about this.
Oh, okay. So I was gonna I was going to cover this more in depth as we go, but yeah, I mean, we can kind of take it from the top because there are people who, for varying degrees and reasons, side with the villains. I tend to see their prescription as being a little more direct and a little more on the nose to address what they view as an issue, because typically, and not all, right? Like Joker is one of those like nefarious characters that he's just evil for the sake of being evil, and I'm not necessarily talking about those. Usually, it's a villain that has a nuanced thought and rationale behind. So, like Thanos' excuse in Infinity War for wanting to wipe out half of existence, like when he's explaining it and you're looking at it, it's like, yeah, I mean, he's not necessarily wrong. Like I may not necessarily like the way he's going about doing it, but he sees the problem and he's going to address it in the most direct way forward or that he can. Like Magneto in the X-Men, there have been arcs throughout X-Men where Magneto has just been a belligerently evil fucker. But for the most part, Magneto's goal for in the X-Men universe and the Marvel universe is he is trying to defend mutant kind, and he views,
and not only that, but he's trying to build a pro mutant society. Like he wants to have like a mutants to be have their own society and function in their own way, like almost like a separatist. He's basically like he just wants the mutants to go away, and or in some cases he gets over eccentric and like wants to like purge non-mutants or whatever, but most of the time he just wants to get away and have a mutant society.
Right, and a lot of time his more nefariously evil, evil and villainous actions are more as a direct result of the actions of humans and things that they've done. Like it's more a defensive action than an aggressive. Or in the occasions that it is aggressive, it's because he sees the writing on the wall, and when Magneto's backstory and everything with the Nazi Germany, being a Jew and all of that stuff. Like when you understand Magneto's personality and who he is and his reasoning for it, like when he is more aggressive and he is more direct, it's because he sees the threat and he's addressing the threat before the threat has a chance to go to come after him first. So just those are two very specific examples, but there are a lot of others throughout literature and other like comic books and video games and movies and stuff like that. That when you sit down and you look at the villain, they're not necessarily wrong. I just may not always agree with the way they go about it. But at the end of the day, like I'm kind of on their side. And then a lot of times when you look at my problem, when you look at the bad guy or the good guy, they're not doing anything.
Like right. They're playing with kid gloves. Like it's kind of like so. And I was gonna expound upon that, kind of like you mentioned the Joker and a lot of canonified versions of the Joker are different, right? Most of them are very directly evil, but if you look at like the Heath Ledger Joker in Dark Knight, there's the meme, and I don't necessarily know like if it was meant to be that way in the way that they wrote the script, but basically he was destroying all of the mob money financing, and he was destroying the mob directly with his actions, and he took direct action against all the criminals in Gotham City more so than Batman did himself. And so in some ways, yeah, I do see the side of the villain in that case. But I think that's more of a flip of how society is viewing the media. And I think that's what I'm saying is like kind of like giving in to this sort of nihilist perspective. And that's why I clarified next week is even in this case where I do agree that like Joker was justified in taking action against the mobsters, because Batman's not going to go in there and actually like end the mobsters, like actually off them or burn all their money, because that would be that's not something that Batman is looking to do. He's looking to try to be the like beacon of justice. He wants to be the clean shooter, and so he's not gonna go after them in that direct of a way. But I think it's more of a telling story about how society is now looking at media, and when we're creating media, we're saying, well, and how we view the media too. It's not just how they're creating it, but how we're viewing it. Because when I view it, and the reason that I'm siding to some extent with the Joker in that case is because the framing of the way that he's going after those guys. Okay, well, yeah, he's kind of justified. He's a little bit off his rocker, but he's justified in taking action against these mobsters and ruining them. But if it were a positive society, so take like the old Superman movies where Superman saves Lois Lane and saves the world from all disaster or whatever. The reason we were able to have that kind of media is because we had such a positive society. And now the ideology is kind of flipped to where now I look at every villain in regular media, and yeah, I do kind of a lot of times I do look at them, kind of like you said, Thanos. I look at their perspective and I say, well, I don't really like their prescription for the solution, but they're doing more than the heroes are doing to solve the problems of society and everything. So how can I disagree with them? And I think that's kind of where you're coming from.
Right. And like, making the Joker, the Heath Ledger's Joker versus Batman comparison, like when you look at, like I was talking about Magneto, when you look at Professor X on the opposite side of that, what has any of his, like, we need to peacefully get along with the humans as far as, the Marvel universe and the X-Men universe go, like, what has any of his peaceful solution ever produced? Like, they're still just as hated by humans as if he had done nothing at all, or if he had turned completely villainous. In fact, to some extent, Magneto's solution ends up paying some level of dividends, because they do have Genosha and they have like their own island nation where they can go and to some extent be left alone. Maybe maybe there's something to be said for that. You want the government to leave you alone, maybe you should give them an incentive to do that. Not saying that that's right, but I mean,
but you're siding with it.
Right. So
this is like organized crime in the 50s and 60s brought more order to those big cities than the government. If I'm distilling this down. Okay.
Right. Like, if you want to look at it from a historical perspective and bring it back to that, there have been...
Yeah, like the prohibition gangsters protecting the businesses and protecting everything more so than the government even would, in that way. Like, that is kind of a good comparison, I guess.
And those aren't like historical anomalies. Like, that has happened throughout history. Like, all of civilized society has had these what would be deemed criminal elements that actually produce more positive outcome for their communities than the good guys in the government and
and I guess
the people who are in charge.
We got to look at how it got framed as like the gangsters, the bad guys, and the government good guys. Of course, that's the media, right? That mostly portrays it that way. When in reality, it's like, I mean, they're not. Neither of them can be described as good guys. I mean,
Right.
You can't really. You may side with the mobsters more than the government, but it's not like they're purely good, right? Like,
Yeah, I guess I understand where you're coming from with that. Like, those who are the good guys definitely aren't good or producing anything necessarily positive in those situations, and really in a lot of like movies and comics, literary type examples that we're talking about. Like, if you really get into nuance of it, what do the good guys often produce other than to stand opposed to the bad guy, who may or may not be moving towards the same goal, just trying to move there a lot more aggressively.
I mean, I'm rereading the Iliad right now. It's like one of the first forms of literature, right? First pieces of literature that we have, and like there's no set good guy versus bad guy in there. Like is Achilles the protagonist? I mean, Achilles doesn't have a whole lot of redeeming qualities. Is Hector? I don't know.
He's kind of selfish.
Kind of how you read it, right? Yeah, he's selfish. He's petty,
arrogant.
Yeah. I mean, you might read about Achilles and like him, but you can't say that he's necessarily the good guy of that story.
Right.
Well, but like what I'm contrasting, what I was contrasting is nowadays you are seeing darker and darker media to where it's like, every time, you can't have the hero just win, and you can't, usually sometimes you don't even have the hero win at all. Either they get beat up or, whatever thing that may happen. There's no good resolution to try to like give you hope. And I think that it's a like symptom of what we're in kind of now. Like you don't need to have hope. So none of your media, none of the media that we're creating is going to be hopeful, because none of us feel hopeful about the future. That's kind of what I'm picking up from all the media that I'm looking at. But I look at something like, so if I look at something that like My Hero Academia, it has elements kind of like what you're saying with both perspectives. They have a great villain called Stain. I don't know if any of you guys watched it, or if you're gonna care to watch it. So I might spoil something for you. But My Hero.
What? Yeah, I'd say go ahead. My kids are fans, and I will probably end up watching at some point. But I'm not concerned about spoilers. Like go for it.
Yeah, so Stain is a villain, and he points out, so there's a group of heroes, and they essentially use heroes as they're paid professionals. Like the government will go, contract them out to go deal with crime in the streets. And they essentially pay these heroes, and they work for agencies that are, essentially corporate entities, and they go out and work with the government to save people. That's the idea anyway. But Stain is a villain who points out the fact that these institutions are corrupted. And he says, like, look at these heroes that you're looking up to. None of them are like All Might, who is the main hero, who actually he's the strongest guy. He's essentially the Superman of the universe. He actually believes in trying to help people. Every single chance you see All Might, he is trying to help people, even when he's like about to like possibly die. He is going out of his way to save every person, and it's because of his like just his nature. He is a hero, and Stain basically says, look at All Might. He is the only actual hero of all of these people. All the rest of them are phonies, and they're getting paid to do this, and they don't care about you. Like they don't care about you humans, like you regular humans, because essentially they have some people who have powers who go on to do this hero work. And then they have other people who are just, like regular people who don't get the hero gene, essentially. And he's telling the regular people, hey, these people won't save you. They don't care about you because they're just working for, they're working for pay, essentially. They're doing this as a career.
So they're the cops.
Basically. And that's kind of like where you see his point. But in the end, in this story, the reason why this story is better, I think, than some of the other ones is because the heroes, the actual heroes, like these kids that are going through the hero school, a lot of them actually are trying to be heroes. They don't care about the job. They care about saving people. And that's where it comes through, is like they're trying to prove him wrong. And he even acknowledges, he says, I forget what the exact line, but he basically acknowledges one of the kids that are trying to train to become a hero. He says, like, essentially, I respect you because you're not like the others. Essentially, you are a hero, and that's what I'm saying. Like that gives me like a hope. But like a lot of the current media is just like, yeah, might as well side with the villain, right? Because all the heroes are garbage. They're like just like our politicians now. Like they're not going to get anything done. They don't care about you, and they're only there to collect a check, kind of thing.
Yeah, the hero lifted on a pedestal right now is Zelensky in Ukraine. This is supposed to be our hero, right?
Well, and the problem, I think, to that point, there are really good like alternate forms of media. I don't want to say alternate, but it's lesser known comics and stuff like that, like you see with Invincible, where his for anybody who hasn't seen it, my son and I did a Invincible review a while ago, and if you haven't seen it at this point, like, it's on you, not me. So I don't think I'm necessarily spoiling anything, but like when you find out that Omni-Man is not actually this incredible, like, world-saving hero, he's actually here to bring about the enslavement of the planet by his own people, and then his son finds out and like actually stands up to him. Like, you get some good nuance and balance between who the heroes are, who the villains are, and kind of how the actual heroes differentiate themselves from the pedestal heroes that we've been given for years. So like, that's my problem with like Professor X and some of the other heroes is, at the end of the day, a lot of their solutions kind of seem like communism, and it's hard for me to get on that side. It's like, oh yeah, we just need the greater good will take care of it. Like, we're gonna stop these villains, and we're all gonna be just kumbaya, rah rah rah, and like that's not how the world works.
Well, it's either like communism or it's like libertine, to the point of like, oh, the free market, like they're going to choose us heroes to be the right way or something like that. And the idea of like, they're just going to choose it, you're not going to get anywhere doing that kind of strategy.
Right. So I do like some of the way that heroes are being portrayed with newer media, and that it is giving them a more of a nuanced approach to the way they flesh out their ideas and their ideals, and the way they kind of combat what is the actual evil in the story, because evil is kind of as opposed to necessarily the villain, the bad guy is kind of evolving in these stories too, which is interesting, because I do think there are some good comparisons to the way these stories are evolving with how you look at the good guy versus the bad guy, and you can draw some comparisons to the world itself. Like, media imitates reality to some extent, and there has been a lot more over the last several years of seeing the heroes not portrayed so much as like this beautiful thing on a pedestal, but being given sort of a realistic look, and then when you think historically of the things that have been put up on that pedestal in society, as opposed to how they are in reality, like police, like the military, like politicians, like a lot of things. Like, you're starting to see some of that truth in the world that may not have existed 25 years ago.
Is my cat coming through? Can you hear her meowing?
It's not annoying or anything, but it's no, it's fine.
I need your spear.
It's always right here, man. It's always right here.
Yeah, I need one next to me. No, I mean, like it is easier to get on board with the hero when the hero is like believable. Like, my favorite heroes are the ones that actually are either like reluctant heroes, or they go through their own like temptation of joining the dark side, if you will, right? Like, if your hero is like just pure Captain America, I actually like Captain America, but like he's a little bit too unbelievable sometimes.
Well, so
then it's you have a hard time like relating to him, because we all are tempted or reluctant.
Well, but there are some people who are generally I do think there are generally people who have a proclivity for being a good person. So that being portrayed in media isn't a problem for me. I think a lot of people do have a problem with that because they think everybody is shades of gray. I don't, like I don't think.
Who's
Like
the
I would
hero
like
in
to.
that story? 50
What?
Shades of Grey. No, I'm just kidding. Keep going. Sorry.
Who was the villain in that?
I mean, probably her.
I've never read any of it.
She got all that stuff up for free out of that guy, pretty much.
Oh god.
Oh man. Sorry,
You know, there are those in the libertarian community that would argue that it was not free. She earned every bit of that.
But no, so like take one of my favorite animes, Goku and Dragon Ball. So so obviously Goku, if you make a story about Goku and you say like, oh yeah, he's kind of, all these, he's not quite, black and white. He's not a hero, and everybody else is like these guys aren't villains. Then it would be really weird to have that kind of character because honestly, the whole story breaks down. Because if Goku is just as evil as some of the villains, then what's the point of him even fighting in that point? Because all he's trying to do is he's just going to be fighting over stealing planets. He becomes just like what Vegeta is, and Vegeta kind of is that perspective. He kind of is the guy who eventually he comes around even, and he's like, oh,
he comes around like several times, right? Like he experiences many redemption arcs. But I think
yeah.
I mean that's like Magneto. Magneto has sort of a similar journey. He will have his moments where he not necessarily like changes his stripes, but he'll come around and behave himself to some extent or another.
So, he like builds alliances.
Professor X and Magneto need each other, and Goku and Vegeta need each other. Like if you had just a Goku without a Vegeta, then DBZ wouldn't be as entertaining.
Well, I mean,
interesting.
I don't know. Like the rivalry between them is important, but even as their heroes, like they're both heroes now, right? Like in the story, all canonically, like after Vegeta basically has betrayed Goku twice, now they're both heroes, and they compete against each other to be better, and they want to save the world now. Like Vegeta doesn't just think that he needs to take planets anymore. He realizes that there are people, and he can treat them in a way that's reasonable. But he needs to be there to compete now. But I think now after you have that initial conflict with them, now it's just about them both trying to better each other, and it makes that story better because of that. But I don't think like if you take just Goku himself and you said, okay, well, Goku doesn't need to be a perfect hero. Every villain he needs to fight needs to be kind of right, and he needs to be kind of wrong sometimes, and he needs to be abusing his power or something like that. I see, too much of that kind of going in the media where now it's like, oh, this hero abuses his power or something like that, or doesn't use it correctly. And almost every movie becomes like a pseudo Hancock type movie now. Like every superhero film is going to basically become a Hancock, where it's anti-heroes, all anti-heroes, because nobody can be a true hero and just feel that they're doing the right thing. And you could always have the hero do the right thing in the wrong way, and then kind of explain to the hero like, hey, like this approach wasn't the right way. But I feel like it's just kind of I don't know what to.
Okay. On that, you can always, or you could have a hero do the right thing in the wrong way. Would you qualify a Punisher as a hero or a villain?
Well, I mean, he's obviously.
I don't think he's an anti-hero. Like I
don't know.
Like
Punisher
I'm like, I get it. Like the people that he kills are not good people, but does that make him a hero?
I would say by the metric, he's a hero because he is stopping, like he's stopping thugs and criminals. But if you know, he's taking some actions that aren't heroic, I guess, in the traditional sense. And
See,
I think that's where
I would put him more in like a Thanos-esque camp as far as like his general approach. Like and with all that being said, like I love Punisher. I've been a big Punisher fan since I was a kid. I got into the Punisher young, just out of dumb luck, video game, and it kind of, but also having a good understanding of who and what the Punisher actually was and stood for through like his history and backstory and everything. It also kind of informed some of my beliefs growing up because media does imitate reality, and there is a lot of truth in the things that they talk about in those stories when you look at that kind of stuff. So, but like I was saying, if you really boil it down,
well,
he really is taking a very Thanos-esque approach.
But did you? I mean, if we have to make it, is he a hero or a villain? Then obviously I'm going to err on the side of the hero because he is taking initiative to clean up the bad members of society. So he's doing something that's heroic, but it's just he's taking the wrong methodology. And that's kind of like, I guess, what we were going off of. Did you actually watch the Netflix Punisher show by chance?
Most of it, yeah. I didn't finish it.
So, if you want to ask, is he heroic? If you look at what was done to him, both by the people who were pursuing him and by the actual what they actually did to his family, do you think that taking retribution against someone who has been, I think that's kind of where the perspective lies. Do you think taking retribution against people who have wronged, basically, if you aggress on people who have, in the libertarian sense, if they violated the NAP against people, and
we're not libertarian on this show anymore, man.
I'm just saying.
I did a whole thing talking about the Reno reset and why post-libertarians are right or something like that. I don't think that's actually what I did, but
yeah. So, but even if you were to say that, so if you take the non-libertarian approach, would you rather the cops go in there and actually do their job and clean up society and actually take care of things so that Punisher doesn't have to do this? Then yes, but is Punisher doing a service to actually clean up these bad people that are in the world that are gang members and doing all this stuff? Just like we were talking about the gangsters. If you were in that city and Punisher kills a gang member who could have killed your kid, I mean, are you not going to be thankful for that kind of person? Like, thank you. Like, you would be shaking his hand and say, "Thank you, sir." Like I appreciate that. I mean, I would. I don't know about you guys. I would be grateful for someone cleaning up like crazy and terrible people off the streets. I'm not.
Okay.
Kind of like the latest Batman. I mean, what's his name? Is like he's cleaning the streets of some awful people, some awful mobsters, right? And then the bad guys in that movie are online autists who like guns. So who's the good guy and who's the bad guy in our eyes as far as that movie is concerned?
I haven't watched the new Batman.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, just keep it in the back of your mind whenever you do watch it. At the end of the day, the three of us are actually the bad guys.
Online anonymous people who like guns. That's all I'll say.
We're not all that anonymous, though.
It's like not all of us are autists either. So
I don't know. Trey 50 Daniel may not actually be his name. I mean, I had my suspicions that 50 wasn't his middle name, but I wasn't 100% positive on that. So.
Clear indicator. all of a sudden just display the spectrum above my head.
All right, okay, so I kind of brought up the Punisher thing because,
I have a question for you about Thanos. What does Thanos write about?
so
Are
have
you trying to
seen-
get some like Bill Gates bucks? Like, is this what you're doing?
No, I don't think he's actually right in our universe. Like
He's not like a deep
I have
populated-
done-
Eat your bugs.
I have done very
I will
deep.
tell a Snope and make them eat the bugs, and then they will live in the pods.
Thanos is probably like, all I had to do was like create a virus and a vaccine. That's all I had to do. I didn't have to do anything else. Sorry, go ahead, Jess.
Okay, so I've done a couple deep looks at why overpopulation is not actually a problem on this planet. So I'm not saying
this planet.
in this universe.
Mars is a different story.
Yeah, Mars.
Right. Thanos is set in this Marvel Cinematic Universe, in this Marvel comic book universe. Like I'm not saying that for our world that we live in that his prescription is right.
Gotcha.
I'm
Okay.
saying that in that universe, when he is explaining the problem that he is seeing across the universe of crowding out planets and destroying resources and everything else, and just like completely obliterating the ability for productive continuation of life in the universe, and his solution is pretty aggressively horrible, but it's also like when he explains it all out and like he gives his kind of reasoning behind it, it's like, well, he's not all that wrong.
Well, and he was wronged. Like if you look at the fact, like they did that to him too.
right.
You know, like people did that, like they did that to his planet, and he basically that's why his race or species didn't continue to that degree.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what he's explaining. It's like, hey, because we all had this issue, because now my people are no longer exist, so now like I think that this would be the solution to fix all of our problems. And you can sympathize with him. Like you can say, hey, I get it. Like what you're trying to do, I get it. It's not the right way, clearly, but I get why you would reach that conclusion.
Yeah. And a historical example here is 1920s Germany was awful. The Weimar Republic was a terrible, terrible place. And it makes sense why someone might rise to power. And I'm just going to leave it there. I'm not going to go any further on this one.
So
insert random insert the typical question. Would you go back in time and kill baby Hitler?
No, I would try to prevent World War One.
Yeah, that's probably the
True.
better solution. See, that's where we end up with the.
Or I would at least not paint Germany as like the ultimate evil in World War One and in the aftermath of World War One. So that was an example of the villain chosen for us after that war was obviously the loser, one of the losers, Germany, and then what do you have next? Is you have the Weimar Republic, and then the rise of the Nazis, and then World War II, and this new global order.
And you see that playing out even like right now with the whole Russia-Ukraine conflict, and like the villain has been assigned, like, and then if you side with the villain, you're some sort of like extremist when you might
Russian
be looking
bots.
right. You might be looking at
Yeah.
the situation kind of like with the Thanos thing, or kind of like with the Magneto thing, and it's like, well, maybe there's more going on with this than just good guy and bad guy. And don't get me wrong, because this is something that I also wanted to talk about with y'all was I really hate the over sympathizing of or making villains like too much of a sympathetic character, like what they did with Maleficent in Disney, like what Disney did with Maleficent. Like, no, fuck that. Like, Maleficent needs to be just this brutally, horribly evil fuck. Like, don't go and make it some sympathetic character. Like, not all villains need to be some like sad story of being misunderstood. Just like you were saying, with not all heroes need to be like some shade of gray anti-hero. Like there do need to be the just like purely good out there. There should definitely be on the villain side of it, like there should definitely be the purely evil villain, and we don't need to be creating sympathy for every single villain that's out there. Like that's where you get the downfall of modern religion, is that the villain in that story has been made into a sympathetic character and some misunderstood thing, which is a fucking joke. Anyway, we could do a whole episode on my problem with modern religion, but yeah, like I'm not saying I want to over sympathize every villain, but like when you look at it, there is nuance in some of what we see, especially where certain levels of media are portraying the characters, whether it be fictional or historical or in modern times.
Let me piss off your audience and me as well. So obviously, the current culture and the way we grew up and the way like public schools and media portrays Abraham Lincoln is that he's like the ultimate hero, like number one president, right? But we have been in this space where Abraham Lincoln is like the ultimate evil, and I have a contrarian spirit about me, anyways, and I side more with like the Southern sympathizers. Yet one of my favorite presidents is Andrew Jackson, who 30 years before Abraham Lincoln comes into office also said that the Union should not split. So would Jackson have acted similarly as Abraham Lincoln had he been in his position? And this kind of creates some sympathy in my mind towards Lincoln.
Damn it, you stumped me.
Well, so I think he probably would. I mean, clearly, like the person in power would want the cohesiveness of the Union. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that would be the natural, like, kind of ideal, scenario for their order, right? Like if it's kind of like if it were to happen now, obviously there would be a huge power grab because of the fact that we do want the Union to stay the whole, but I don't think that Jackson would have taken the exact same approach to like vilify to the point like where it's just like plundering his opponents. Like yeah. I don't think he's the same kind of person that Lincoln was to go and plunder your opponents and essentially say, like you're going to be like the second class citizens of our country because you guys decided to secede at some point.
Yeah, I think I agree. Yeah, Jackson was a good leader, a better leader than Lincoln. Also, he had the military history as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you look at like the 1820s, 1830s, 30 years before, the Civil War and what happened there, and the say 10 to 15 years that led up to that point. Like if you look back in that earlier 1800s, there were actually legitimate good faith arguments or good faith negotiations that were made between with the federal government and the North, the South, like keeping things amenable to keep the states together to prevent this from becoming a problem. And then as you get closer to that point, you get closer to secession, to the Confederacy forming, to the Civil War beginning. Those good faith negotiations stopped being good faith. It started becoming a thing where the North was making these deals and then reneging on them immediately, and throwing the whole thing into disarray. So yeah, like the leadership the leadership leading up to that point is definitely plays a huge part in that. And like yeah, I like you said, like we kind of live in this or exist in this space where Lincoln is not at all the good guy. But when you look at the nuance of it, was he also necessarily the consummate bad guy? Well, no, maybe not. But I do think there were definitely some things that happened that you would have to lean more towards. He didn't make good faith effort to be the good guy as far as all of that went.
He also married Mary Todd, and that shows that he doesn't make the best decisions. So
you always go after her.
She's nuts.
I mean, look, we've all married some nutso at some point in our lives, right? I mean, maybe not all of us, but
2 out of 3 at least.
2 out of 3 of us.
Well, it goes back to like the I don't know if you guys saw that viral sort of viral tweet. Every girl is bi, except you need to figure out whether it's polar or sexual. That's pretty much what it is.
That's funny.
So Trey's still early enough that his crazy is to be determined. But
Mine's
she
back
keeps
to that
it
as
to
well.
a low level of crazy. So,
Oh gosh.
see, I tried to play the crazy hot scale the right way. I didn't do what some people do and pick the wrong point on the line.
no, you're not supposed to go like as
He
far
saw the
as
scale before he got married. I see how it goes.
and say you want to go for like the 10 on the crazy or on the hot, but also like as high on that crazy line, and just hope that she doesn't accidentally appear on the wrong side of that line at some point in the future. That's not the way you're supposed to do that.
Naturally, a chat about villains would lead to our conversation about women.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Is Thanos your favorite villain?
No, not even close.
Okay.
Because we did talk about Superman a little bit, and like the Boy Scout perspective, like the consummate good guy. I actually not the DC cinematic universe Lex Luthor, but the comic book Lex Luthor. I would actually probably put him as my favorite bad guy, because like if you look at everything that Lex Luthor is doing, it is almost completely to better humanity. Like his hatred of Superman is not because he wants to destroy the world. He hates Superman because Superman represents this thing that shouldn't exist. Like Superman is this alien that could effectively take over everything at the drop of a hat if he ever chose to. And so like Lex Luthor wants to protect humanity from that. Like that's the way he goes about it is maybe a little bit evil-ish, but like that's his goal is to protect humanity. And if he advances his own interest in the process, then more power to him as far as
Yeah,
he's
I mean he's basically
he,
Tony Stark without power, like without any actual technology that would like he doesn't put on a suit of armor. I mean, I think maybe occasionally he has. I don't know.
Yeah, he does have a power armor that he uses to fight Superman from time to time. But yes, he doesn't that's not his day-to-day thing. Like he uses his genius and his money and his power and his influence and all of that to try to build humanity and to try to build a better world. And he might be kind of evil in the way he goes about it at times, but like he's not necessarily wrong, even to the extent that he gets himself elected president at one point in the universe. So I would probably put him as my number one villain, just because.
See, they're predicting Elon Musk becoming president. That's what that was. It's like one of those Simpson memes. Like all of a sudden, Elon Musk is going to become president.
Shoot.
I think they might have to change some things in the Constitution to do that, and if they're going to change the Constitution, they're going to do some other things first that probably prevent that from being the reality. All right, so who are some like legitimate villains and bad guys that that kind of exist that maybe, so like Mark was talking about with Lincoln and Jackson, history is not as kind to Jackson because of the Indian thing, and history is incredibly kind to Lincoln because of the Civil War thing, or because of the slavery thing. But
which there are sources out there. It's like if like after the war, Lincoln wants to send the freed slaves to Haiti, right? So it's like
Lincoln was not a good dude.
Followed all the way through. Never mind. I'm not gonna say anything. Continue.
So like, what are some other examples of like maybe historically, you get, and without going to the obvious like Hitler stuff, we've hinted at that enough, but like, what are some other things that like hero villain? They may not always be portrayed in a necessarily an honest light. Like you get an incredibly one-sided view of it that doesn't paint the picture as it truly is.
This is kind of a weird example, but I've read Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. So he was like the Stoic philosopher king of Rome, right? And like you read the Meditations, you're like, most of this stuff, if not all of it, is like great advice. Yet his son is Commodus. If you've watched Gladiator, like they actually do a good job of portraying who he was as a person. He was nuts. He was crazy. He murdered all kinds of people, especially Christians. So Marcus Aurelius is obviously painted in a good light because of what he wrote in his personal journal. And I know you can't like judge someone based off of their son's actions, but your son becomes like one of the most evil people of that time. Like, does that mean that Marcus Aurelius was not necessarily the good person that he's presented to be because his son turned out to be a complete degenerate? Like, did he not raise his son? Was he like a super distant father? I mean, obviously fatherhood at that time was different too, but it's an interesting thing to think about.
I mean, yeah, like fatherhood was different at that time, but there are also plenty of historical examples that would indicate that, it wasn't. So
yeah.
The person that I think of most that is kind of villainized, that I would say it's not so clear on, is probably Caesar. A lot of people view Caesar as like a villain, like he was, he ruled, he ruled over Rome, kind of thing.
Sorry, Julius.
Yeah, Julius Caesar. Yeah. Basically, the idea, not the dressing, obviously. But Julius Caesar, people thought that a lot of people have that connotation of like he was a very cruel ruler. He would sentence people to death, all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, generally speaking, the country was like improving under his rule overall. It was only because he trusted people that he shouldn't have, and obviously it came back to bite him eventually. But only because he trusted people he shouldn't have, that was the reason that the country went to shambles and all of the empire falling and all of that kind of stuff. It wasn't because of his rule though. He was actually generally a good ruler. He was a just ruler for the most part, from the historical things that you can read about. But
Rome was in major decay. The Constitution had completely fallen apart. The Roman Senate was full of degenerates. And I mean, obviously, people were like begging for a Caesar at that point in time. and he was probably the best person to step into that role.
I view him kind of in that Lex Luthor-ish that vein. He saw the problem. Maybe he was more of a reluctant with it, but he saw the problem and he went and addressed it. And like, was what he did necessarily the best way to go about it? I mean, who knows?
I mean,
but it was the way he went about it. It was the way he knew.
The Civil Wars, though, like leading up to his rise, it was all military men, like his military men versus the other like military men. Like very few civilians actually died before his rise. So, I mean, that's I think a point in like just that whole. Like if we had a Caesar rise now or whatever, like civilians might be dying. Unfortunately, I don't know.
Would civilians be dying?
Well, like Tho Bishop has compared DeSantis to Caesar. So I don't know what does DeSantis is he gonna all of a sudden just start creating a conflict? And I don't think so. But yeah.
No.
And in that case, would civilians be dying because of as like casualties of war or collateral damage, or would civilians be dying because civilians would join up with one side or the other and go like put themselves behind whatever they were aligning with? Because at that point, like there's still military enlistment. It isn't necessarily the same as what it was back in those times. So like they would go and join Caesar's army, and it's now military casualty, even though it may actually be just like a civilian who said, I'm here to fight for your army. The way they categorize and classify civilian versus non-civilian in modern times, would they necessarily be civilian casualties, or would they be people who are actually like volunteering to be part of the fight but don't have that designation?
Yeah, I don't know if that's if there's a good way to clarify that. Like, I would think most people would sign up to protect their cause. Like, I mean, obviously, the people like kind of like us. Obviously, we want to defend. Like, if someone were to aggress upon us and try to, take our guns or take stuff from us, kind of like we were talking about earlier. I think we're all gonna kind of be like, yeah, nah, we're gonna all get together and try to do something about that.
I don't think that if there was like an American Caesar, it wouldn't be like we're already kind of in like a cold civil war, right? Like the way things are now would escalate. So to the extent that people are harmed would be like rioting in the streets and especially the cities, right? Like there wouldn't be an actual like clash or conflict between two opposing units.
Yeah, you're probably right on that. At least not right away.
Yeah,
like that might manifest itself at some point if it continued. But yeah, that definitely wouldn't probably be the reality of the situation at least for the first several years, if not decade. That's interesting to think about.
It certainly is.
That's why you need to get out in the country, get far away from everything, raise chickens and goats, and threaten your children on a daily basis. All the good necessities of life. Let's see.
Did you answer your question?
No, I really didn't.
This is a tough one for you.
Yeah. Because it's too obvious of like the anarchist type of an answer. Like Ted Kaczynski is.
Oh, okay.
He's probably the one, because I have read all of his books, and like it's hard to delineate him from being the villain because because of what he did. Like, and also he might legitimately be crazy, but he is, he got the
Well, like
he got the he was able to prescribe the problem, but his solution may not have been necessarily right. But like he was brilliant in that he really kind of hit the whole thing on the head very squarely, and it's hard to say that he was like misunderstood and not necessarily evil unless you really go in and look at his like the MK Ultra stuff. But like, did that influence him to like did the MK Ultra stuff influence him to utilize the U.S. Postal Service, or was that just other stuff going on? Like
like an entrapment case going on,
right? Like you can't necessarily, like in both of your cases, like you could look at one as having been painted as a hero, or a more heroic type of historical figure, but there could be some question with that, and like the other with Julius Caesar having been painted as more of a villainous character historically, but really there was some like redeeming qualities to what he was doing and why. I don't know if you can really make that distinction with Kaczynski as much.
I think that Ted, and I haven't read everything, so I can't say that I can be precise, but from what I understand of the ethos and everything, I've sort of browsed, but I haven't read the entirety of what he was talking about. But I do think that he was prescribing a problem, but I don't think he described the exact root cause of the problem. I think he jumped the shark and kind of went to he went off on a tangent for some reason and kind of landed in the wrong place.
I can see that.
Because I think like I believe he's blaming the Industrial Revolution, and stuff like that. Like obviously the idea that man is no longer creating something and working with his hands. It does it does come off as someone who obviously believes in Austrian economics, kind of the subjective theory of value. You can create anything. If we're creating this video now, if it was worth a lot of value, obviously people would be paying you a lot of money to make these kind of videos and stuff like that. But that's the whole idea of the subjective theory of value. But he's kind of getting to the point of, he's almost saying like a communist would, like of like the idea that man doesn't work with his hands anymore is the reason why he's sad, and thus that's just the vibe. Like, I don't know if I'm exactly right on quoting that, but I know he does blame the Industrial Revolution and the idea that man is no longer directly tied to the work and doing everything physically with his hands necessarily. It's kind of a detriment to society.
I am sympathetic to like people should be creating with their hands, but there is a certain like Marxist quality there to where like that is the only thing, right? Like you're placing all of your value into the labor that you create with your physical, or whatever you create with your physical labor.
Like I said,
speaking of villains, there's Marx.
I didn't think he had the solutions necessarily accurate. Just that he did a pretty good job of prescribing certain problems, and like to your point, Trey, his the root cause of those problems, he may have missed on. Like I definitely don't. I can't say definitively that the reason that we've seen the things that he was prescribing as the problems that have really come to fruition over the last 20 years, from when he was writing this in the 70s and 80s, the things he was describing about the left and the problems that they create and pose, he got those problems spot on right. But is that a result of technological advances and everything, or is that a result of a shifting social structure and cultural degradation? Like, there's a lot more to that than just he got what's wrong, he got that right. How it became wrong may not have been so so accurate. And how do you solve that problem? He also may not have been very close to.
It's kind of like I don't know if you guys noticed. Yesterday was the anniversary of the Killdozer Day. Everybody was memeing about that. So that's another person, I guess you could say they had the wrong prescription for the for the problem, and that those do kind of coincide, like where you see some of these ideas of people seeing wrong in society and seeing wrong in how people are doing things, and then just deciding to take certain measures into their own hands. And I guess you can't necessarily fault them all the time, but yeah, definitely there's some nuance to be had there with what they're going about.
Well, I would say as far as the Killdozer guy goes, I think that's a little bit white pilling for me in this whole conversation, because it seems that generally speaking, most people are pretty sympathetic to his cause and like what he was doing.
I do see like even some of my like normie friends speaking highly of Killdozer guy. So
right, like when they look in it, like the people who actually take the time to listen to or watch a video on or read about his story and what happened to him, and then ultimately what he ended up doing because of all of that. I don't know that I've ever seen anybody who knows what that story is that's like, oh yeah, that was just terrible, he never should have done that. It's like, you know what, I fucking get it. Like that's almost universally the response to that. So that is a little bit white pilling for me. Maybe he's not the villain
He's
we
the
need,
unifier.
but he was the villain we deserve. to take that
nothing like Killdozer guy to unify us all.
To take that Dark Knight phrase. Well, y'all got anything else on the villain conversation? I wanted to, like I said, I wanted to expound on it a little bit, because there is a lot to be talked about with the hero villain conversation, both historically, in comics and video games and movies and different forms of literature. Like it's kind of, what is it, the victor will write the history books. So you get things painted in certain perspectives that there's always a little more nuance involved. Y'all got any closing thoughts on all of this?
The first time I ever felt sympathy towards a villain was towards Scar in The Lion King. Number one is because he's cooler looking than Mufasa. And number two, I think he is like second born, right? So I'm the second born of three boys. And so middle children, they always go through that complex where, the oldest is the golden child. So I kind of related to Scar until he shoved his brother into the stampede. And I was like, well, then you took it too far, man. I'm also not
being the older brother. Being the older brother who wasn't the golden child.
Oh, you weren't.
I just don't get it. Yeah, see, I didn't get away with anything. My younger brother,
my older brother would say that he wasn't the golden child either. So,
see, my younger brother thought that I was the. My younger brother thought that I was the golden child, but when I look back at it, I was just fucking better than him. Like, it's not that. It's not like it. It was because I was undeserving. Like, I was just that much better.
Built different.
I promise I'm not out to get my nephew. I love him.
But I guess my closing thoughts on it is I don't mind having different villains in media. I don't mind having some that have nuance and obviously point out the flaws of the heroes and point out the flaws in society in general. I think that what my broader point is that I'm seeing so much of media of just you can't have a heroic arc or a heroic story in something as much anymore without them having to put some doubt on the hero of like, is he really heroic? There just aren't any heroes that are truly heroic anymore, really, in the media that we're seeing. And they just don't have that sort of give you that sort of hope. And I think that we need more of that kind of stuff in our media to kind of give us, hey, they saved the day, they saved the world from destruction, and there's going to be a bright tomorrow because of the hero. I just would like to see more of that in the media, because I think that I look at what during the times of that media, what the world that was being produced, and it could be just been a reflection of the world around it, but the world when some of these shows and when some of these this media was produced, it was just a much better society because they had hope.
And I
I
guess
would
for
agree
my
with
closing
that.
thing,
Yeah.
yeah. And I guess for my closing thing, like I did mention that there have been a couple things that have been white pilling for me, and it's that through some of this shift in media with some of these things being presented, it does have people actually looking at things from a more nuanced viewpoint, and looking for the truth behind who is the good guy and who is the bad guy, and what's the actual differentiation in that. And some people, to some extent, like I would say, even in like my normie groups, like, because like I'll put this episode up on my political Facebook page, and I might share it to my normie one, but I most likely won't. But there are people who follow me on the political page for some reason, and they start sharing stuff that you wouldn't expect them to. So there is some white pilling that some people are starting to come around to looking at things from a more nuanced perspective, and not just taking the face value of who does the media say is the good guy and say is the bad guy, but like to actually dig into the nuance of it and discover that for themselves.
I would like to add one more thing. Parents who bring their kids to drag clubs are villains.
I think we could all agree on that.
Yeah.
I'm glad we can all agree. Apparently, not all Twitter can.
Well, yes, especially libertarian Twitter.
Yeah.
Well, if you know anything about Twitter, it's that everyone there is retarded. Oh no, wait, that's the wrong show.
Yeah, we got the wrong show.
That's not how we end this show. Thank you, everybody who joined us. I just now looked at the comments, and Carlos has been commenting this whole time, and I didn't have it pulled up.
Oh, really? Oh, I have it. Oh. I had the private chat open. I didn't even know this was open.
I did too. I wasn't paying attention. You would think as often as we do this, I would be better at this, but it's been a long weekend, man. I will talk about that on Wednesday's episode, because it was a lot of fun this weekend. So I'll kind of recap my weekend on Wednesday. Hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Be sure to catch us on the morning show. Be sure to check out Trey's Twitch channel and follow him. Go subscribe to Mark's Substack, because he is an excellent writer, and not entirely a Nazi either. So, definitely go check him out. Hope everybody has a great rest of your day, and I will see you on Wednesday.
Thanks, Justin.